I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, and this is Capitol Download. We're in the U.S. Capitol building with Senator Mitch McConnell, the new Senate Majority Leader. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
On Iran, it looks like the vote on tougher sanctions on Iran are likely to be delayed until after that March 24th deadline for negotiations. But if there is no meaningful deal with Iran by March 24th, are you confident that the Senate will pass the bill with tougher sanctions?
Well, I certainly hope so, because it makes a lot of sense, as Senator Menendez has frequently pointed out, to send the message to the Iranians that if no agreement is reached, you get tougher sanctions. I'm glad it's going to come out of the Banking Committee and it'll be on the calendar, and we'll make a decision later as to when to consider it, but it'll be considered. The Iran issue isn't determined by the Israeli elections. It's an important issue now. The discussions are going on now. The Speaker, with my encouragement, invited the Prime Minister to come because of the timeliness of the issue, not because of the Israeli election.
So you think it should go ahead because of the...
Yeah, unless he changes his mind and decides not to come, I think we should go ahead and have the speech, because the issue is very timely in this country, and this is an American initiative, not an Israeli initiative, an American initiative.
You've been here in Washington a long time. You know that the customary practice would have been to let the White House know before this joint meeting with a foreign leader was announced. Do you think that was a mistake with the benefit of some hindsight?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the custom is, but I know there's been a big difference of opinion between ourselves and the President on this issue. It's no secret. We have disagreed with the President on this issue for a year and a half. We now have a new Republican Congress. It has a different agenda in many respects from that of the President. We think the Iran sanctions bill is important and ought to be dealt with in the near future.
Senator Lamar Alexander is working on a proposal that would allow the confirmation of Supreme Court justices with 51 votes, as other judicial nominees can now be confirmed. Do you think this is a good idea?
I have a divided conference on this issue. Some members think we ought to get back to the way the Senate operated for a couple of hundred years before George W. Bush got elected. Others think we shouldn't. There is no consensus at the moment, and I think where we're probably going to end up is with the status quo.
If you did decide, if your conference did decide, your caucus said it was a good idea to move ahead, would you insist on doing it the old way, where you'd have to get 67 votes?
Yeah, that's the way you ought to. Yeah, I do not think we ought to break the rules of the Senate yet again in order to change the rules of the Senate. The changing the rules of the Senate requires 67 votes, a very high threshold. And that's on purpose in order to prevent majorities from taking advantage of minorities. And if we were to readdress this issue or any other rules issue, we ought to do it in the way the rules specify, by requiring 67. And since neither party very often has 67 members, it means that rules changes are made on a bipartisan basis. That was certainly not the way this rogue effort, which established a very bad precedent that any majority can make up a new set of rules anytime it wants to.
So jaws dropped this week when the Koch brothers announced their political network would spend $889 million in the 2016 elections. Was this good news for Republicans?
The Koch brothers, as citizens, have every right, just like Tom Steyer does on the left, to spend every penny they've got on political expression if they choose to. I don't think that's anything that threatens America's democracy.
Does the sheer amount of money involved here concern you at all?
How much speech is too much? You know, that's always an interesting question to ask. How many people have to sit down and shut up in order to make the process work? My view is that in a free country with free speech, everybody ought to be as free to express themselves as Gannett. You know, there are no constraints on what Gannett can do. It's a huge corporation with a big megaphone reaching a whole lot of people in America. I'm okay with that, even though I don't always agree with what the editorial policy is. So I find it no more offensive that Gannett has all that speech than that organizations of individuals do. Everybody can have their fair say in America.
Last question. In October 2012, you told National Journal, famously, you said, the single most important thing we want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president. Now that was right as Republicans were about to take over the House. Now Republicans have also taken over the Senate. So looking ahead in the next 2 years, what would you say is the single most important thing that you'd like to achieve?
The rest of what I had to say, which was that in the meantime, we need to see what we can find together that we can agree on to make progress for the country. The president, of course, went all out to defeat me last year, so I think we can safely say I didn't defeat him and he didn't defeat me, and the American people want us both here. And the question is, what can we do with the mandate we've been given? And I think it's got to be in the political center.
Senator Mitch McConnell, thanks so much for joining us on Capitol Download.
Thank you.